Yeah, I mean, she's really good tennis player. Goes for her shots, takes the ball early, rips. Being a lefty is always tricky, competes really well. I mean, obviously she's beaten a lot of top players this week. I don't really think she needs me to tell her that she's a great player, that we're not going to see enough of her, but we definitely are. And she proved that tonight. I mean, that was really tough.
Alex Eala lost in the round of 16 at Indian Wells. And within hours, Jessica Pegula, a top 10 player, a Grand Slam contender, someone with absolutely nothing to gain from this, sat down in front of cameras and went to bat for her. Hard. Not a polite, she played well. Not a diplomatic non-answer. Pegula said what she actually thought, defended what she actually saw, and made it very clear that one result on one afternoon changes nothing about what Alex Eala is building in this sport. So why did Pegula say this? And why does it matter as much as it does? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and let's get into it. First, let's put the week in context. Because Eala didn't come into Indian Wells quietly and lose quietly. She came in and made noise from the moment she arrived. She beat Coco Gauff, the world number 4, a 2-time Grand Slam champion, in the third round so convincingly that Gauff retired and then sat in her press conference calling Eala the best player at the tournament.
Like to thank Alex for bringing a new demographic to the sport. I really appreciate I think it's great. I know sometimes it's tough when you're playing against a home crowd, but I think that it's great for the sport. So keep being enthusiastic and keep rooting for your player. Yeah.
She navigated the draw as a seeded player for the first time at a WTA 1000 event. She did it in front of crowds so large that a former ATP professional was publicly calling for court reassignments on safety grounds before her practice sessions were even over. By the time the round of 16 arrived, the weight of expectations sitting on her shoulders was enormous. Not just from the tennis world, from an entire country watching from thousands of miles away, and from 2 million Filipino Americans who had shown up in the California desert to be in her corner in person. That is the context for the loss. And that context matters enormously for everything Pegula said afterward.
It's amazing. I mean, I played her when she kind of broke out last year in Miami, and I'm from there, and the whole crowd was against me, and I was like, what on earth is going on? Like, where do these people come from? And then week after week, as she has done well and established herself as a really good player on tour, they all come out to support her. And so I think we saw that in Australia when it was kind of overcrowded. They put her on too small of a court. We saw it here. You can hear it from the hotel. You can hear the crowd roaring, especially at night. So it's incredible.
Pegula was direct. She said Eala is a really good tennis player. She listed the specific reasons: the way she goes for her shots, takes the ball early, the difficulty of facing a left-hander, the way she competes in big moments. She talked about the wins Eala had put together across the week and acknowledged that against top-level opposition, those wins don't happen by accident. And then she said something that cut straight to the point. She said she doesn't really think Eala needs her to tell her she's a great player, and that we are definitely going to be seeing a lot more of her. Proved that this week. That last line. Proved that this week. From a top 10 player about someone who just lost in the round of 16. Pegula wasn't consoling her, she was vouching for her. There's a meaningful difference between those two things.
I think it was Eala is the match that I was looking at, and there was people like wrapped around the stadium just trying to get in, which is pretty crazy. And I mean, it's cool to see and it's exciting, but obviously, for fan experience, I don't know, because I'm not living that same experience, but hopefully the event kind of continues to grow with the fans that we're getting and making that still an enjoyable experience for them. But I did see some of the courts have like lines getting in, and it seems really busy, and I saw some reports that it's some of their busiest they've ever been, and it's packed, and all that, which is, I think, great. I mean, obviously it shows that the event is growing, the sport is growing, and that's amazing, I think, for...
Because Pegula's defense of Eala didn't start this week. It goes back further. At the Australian Open earlier this year, When Eala was drawing enormous crowds, but being scheduled on courts that couldn't physically contain the demand, Pegula spoke up. She pointed out what everyone watching could see, that fans were wrapped around stadiums trying to get in, that the energy around Eala's matches was unlike anything else at the tournament, and that the scheduling decisions weren't serving the fans who were showing up in those numbers. That is a player using her own platform, her own credibility, to advocate for someone else's situation. Pegula had no obligation to say any of that. She said it because she meant it. And that pattern, Pegula consistently showing up for Eala in public, not just in a single post-match comment, but repeatedly across different tournaments and different contexts, tells you that the respect here is genuine. This isn't a courtesy. This is a top player in the sport saying, in multiple forums, over multiple months, this person deserves to be taken seriously, and I will say so out loud. Now let's talk about the moment after the loss itself, because it revealed something important about who Eala is, and it's the thing Pegula was really responding to when she spoke. After the round of 16 match ended, Eala didn't disappear into the tunnel. She stayed on court. She turned to the stands, to the thousands of Filipino fans who had made the journey to California, who had planned their dinners around her match schedule, who had signed up for monthly Tennis Channel subscriptions just to watch her play. And she acknowledged every single one of them. She looked them in the eyes. She waved. She expressed something that was visible from the back of the stadium.
Thank you to not just the Filipino fans, but to everyone, I think, here in Indian Wells. Of course, sa mga Pinoy, maraming salamat sa suporta. Magkita tayo sana sa Miami at sana sa susunod kong laban mas maganda yung laro ko.
20-year-old handling a significant loss on a massive stage with that level of composure and gratitude is the one that stays. Not the scoreline, not the match stats, the moment she chose to stay. Pegula saw that. Everyone in that stadium saw it. And it is a big part of why the respect from her peers keeps growing, regardless of the results on any given day.
I've only dreamed of making tennis grow in the Philippines, and now I'm bringing a whole new audience to tennis all around the world.
And she's humble, and she works hard.
Humble.
Yes, that's why we like her, because she's the face of the Philippines.
Just aside from her talent.
Pegula wasn't alone in this conversation either. Novak Djokovic added his voice, acknowledging that Eala is the biggest tennis player to ever come out of the Philippines, that the interest surrounding her is legitimate and earned, and that the scheduling decisions at certain tournaments haven't always reflected that reality.
There's some players coming from respective countries, like she's coming from Philippines, which is now a big deal. She's been the biggest ever, tennis player from that country.
He framed it carefully, but the point was clear. When a player is generating this level of attention, the institutions around the sport need to respond accordingly. When Djokovic says that and Pegula says that within the same week, the message isn't coming from one corner. It's coming from multiple directions, from people at different levels of the sport, all pointing at the same thing. The WTA has a player on its hands who is doing something genuinely unusual, building a fan movement that crosses continents while simultaneously beating top 10 competition on the biggest stages. That combination is rare, and the players around her are recognizing it openly. There's also a contrast worth drawing here, because it sharpens everything Pegula said about how Eala carries herself. Earlier this year at the French Open, when Coco Gauff made an incredible comeback in the final against Aryna Sabalenka, Sabalenka went into the press conference and essentially credited her own errors rather than Gauff's brilliance. The framing was that she lost because she played poorly, not because her opponent played better.
She won the match not because she played incredible, just because I made all of those mistakes from, if you look from the outside, kind of like from an easy balls.
That framing tells you something about a person's character. Refusing to fully credit your opponent in defeat, especially when that opponent just put together one of the performances of the year, is a choice. And it's a choice that people remember. Eala makes a different choice every single time. In Dubai, after losing to Gauff, she gave full credit. At Indian Wells after winning, she immediately acknowledged the circumstances of the retirement and made sure the focus went to her own performance rather than the scoreline. And after the round of 16 loss, she walked to her fans and stayed. No deflection, no excuses, no performance of disappointment for the cameras. That consistency is what Pegula is actually defending. Not just the tennis, the character. Now the attention turns to Miami. And Miami is not just another tournament on the calendar for Eala. It's the tournament that introduced her to the world stage in the first place. The 2025 Miami Open semifinal run, beating Grand Slam champions Madison Keys and Jelena Ostapenko, is what put her name in the global tennis conversation. It's where people first looked up from whatever they were doing and realized something different was happening. She goes back to Miami now with a full week of Indian Wells behind her. 3 top 10 wins across the past 2 tournaments. A round of 16 result at a WTA 1000 event. A ranking that is knocking on the top 20 door. And a fan base that doesn't shrink after a loss. It shows up harder. The points she earned at Miami last year are due for defense. If she can match or exceed that run, the top 20 becomes reality. And the top 20 changes the seedings, changes the draws, changes the entire structural conversation about where she sits in this sport. Miami is where the Eala story began for a lot of people watching. There's a real chance it's about to enter a completely different chapter. Jessica Pegula said she doesn't think Eala needs anyone to tell her she's a great player. She's right. The week at Indian Wells already said it. The sold-out courts in Dubai said it. The fans wrapped around stadiums in Australia said it. Goff, sitting in a press conference and calling her the best player at the tournament, said it. What Pegula did was something different. She stood up in public, in the immediate aftermath of a loss, and made sure the narrative didn't drift in the wrong direction. She vouched for the long game. She said clearly, "One result doesn't define this. We're going to be seeing a lot more of her. Prove that this week." That's not analysis. That's a peer telling the world to pay attention. Indian Wells is over. Miami is next. And based on everything we've seen over the past 2 weeks, the tennis, the crowds, the character after the loss, and the players who keep showing up to say her name out loud, Alex Eala is not finished making statements this season. Not even close. Hit like, subscribe, and drop your prediction in the comments. Can she go deeper in Miami than she did last year? The story just keeps going.